Hey there, I'm not gonna waste your time. If you've made it all the way to part 5, then you already know the spiel.
Shut up! Right, now get on with the spiel.
This is the second half of the From Russia with Love bits from the band LaserDisc Commentaries that did not make it into part 1.
Alright.
Part 1 had all the shocking bits, blah 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 blah. Let's go!
Rock and roll.
Wait, before you go, I gotta tell you, if you want to watch part 1, it's in the description. Part 1's the crazy one, watch part 1. And then parts 2 and 3 are the Dr. No parts, and then parts 4 and 5 are on From Russia with Love parts, and parts 6 and 7 are on the Goldfinger parts. That's all the parts, I think. I don't have any ideas for any more parts. Let's go!
Woo!
This was a revamp of Dr. No set, after which they got so rich they couldn't care less. They just tore everything down, just built it again, you know. My wife, I wanted to shampoo my hair, and there was a bottle of shampoo there. So I put it in my hair and shampooed it, and then I went and shaved. And while I was shaving, I noticed my hair was going red. My wife had red hair. It was one of those rinses, shampoo rinses. So I was hysterical. This was a Saturday morning. I've now got red hair. So I rushed to a hairdresser's, and he said, "That's all right, we'll dye it black for you." So I went in there, and they dyed it black, but it went sort of black-green.
It's not surprising that Broccoli chose an American to be the first to dramatize Bond for the big screen. Broccoli's contention all along, even as he and Saltzman were selling the series to United Artists, was that Bond had to possess the qualities that would appeal to an American audience. He had to be a ballsy, sexy, two-fisted adventurer in the Raymond Chandler, Mickey Spillane style.
I think that's poor Bob Simmons. Whenever everybody got knocked around, it was always Bob Simmons. Now, these rats, we had to shoot the scene in Spain because the British would not, the health authorities would not allow us to have them in the studio. And unfortunately, Ian died after From Russia with Love. So he came out to Istanbul. Now, the funny thing is he'd never been there, although he wrote about it very knowledgeably. He'd never been there before, at least he told me that. And he came and stayed with my wife and myself. We'd taken a part of a hotel for ourselves. I didn't stay at the Hilton with the rest of the crew. I like to be alone if I can. And after a few days, Sean and Diana, his wife, joined us. And then after a few more days, Robert Shaw said he was coming. So in the end, we had quite a big mob there. And Ian he was a very shy man, which is surprising, but Ian became very relaxed and had rather a pleasant time with us. I must say that I was glad that it was so. I think, I'm trying to remember where I was having lunch at the Mirabelle. It might have been with Sean, I can't remember, when we heard about the death of Ian. It was before I did Thunderball, that's all I remember. It was in between From Russia with Love and Thunderball. He was a very nice man, a very shy man. And I think that's why he was slightly aggressive when he met people and rather arrogant, but it was a shyness more than anything. I was there the first time he saw Dr. No. It was at the opening at the Pavilion Cinema. And he was absolutely elated. Even old Coward was not too disparaging. You know, "My dear boy, it's rather a pleasant picture, surprisingly pleasant, very agreeable, don't you think?" And anyway, I think he had a weak heart, which I never knew about. And I think for quite a time he was sick before he died. And in a funny way, I have a silly, creepy feeling that he died in the same way. We were great caviar fans, and we were buying caviar in Istanbul for about, I'm not exaggerating, about 10% of what you paid anywhere else. They used to buy it straight off the Russian ships. And they were buying it, and they were making a big profit too. And I brought a lot of it back to London with me. And when Pedro Armendáriz, who I knew was dying of cancer, came to say goodbye, I shot all his scenes in a big hurry and From Russia with Love to get rid of him quickly. Ian was there, and the three of us were sitting on a sofa, and he was telling Ian about Hemingway, who was a great friend of Pedro Armendáriz, and how when Pedro had been to see him just before From Russia with Love, Hemingway had grabbed him and said, "Please don't let me go. I won't ever see you again. Please don't let me go." And as the boat pulled out, he tried to jump into the boat with Armendáriz, and he was big, fat, and overweight and over everything. And he practically fell in the sea. They had to grab him. He cut his leg. They put him back on the shore, and they said, you know, Papa, you must go home, but we have to go. And he was telling how he knew that Hemingway was going to kill himself because Hemingway was sick. And he said, I don't intend ever to be a vegetable. And Armendáriz said, I think that's... Armendáriz was a very macho Mexicano. And he said, that's how a man should die. About 2 weeks after he came back here, he went to St. John's Hospital, I think it was, and he had a lunch appointment with his agent, Paul Kohner, and Mrs. Kohner, and Pedro's wife, Carmen. They were all meant to meet at lunch at the Scandia restaurant. I remember it very well. And about 1:30 he hadn't shown up. They were there since 1 o'clock. And they called the hospital and said, has Mr. Armendáriz left? And they said, Mr. Armendáriz is dead. How he did it, we don't know, but he took a shotgun into the hospital and he put it in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Ian was awfully impressed by this. And I remember when we were having lunch just after that, he said, you know, it's astonishing. He said, but I could have told you after that lunch that that was the way Armendáriz was going to die. And he almost committed suicide. In fact, he did commit suicide. He swam when he shouldn't have been, you know. He had a nurse there, and the nurse said, you mustn't swim underwater. And he swam about 2 lengths underwater, and it practically killed him. Like he was dead within a day or so. He didn't want to be a vegetable either.
The war was over. Mostly the rationing was over, where they didn't have anything to eat in England. And all of a sudden, here comes a guy who is a gourmet, an epicure. And everybody was so delighted, especially when he was such an upstanding, fine young fellow knocking down all the bad guys, that he had these wonderful qualities of being tonsorial, perfect, and educated, and charming, and having all of these marvelous attributes of a civilized gentleman, at the same time being a brutal, ruthless killer dedicated to Queen and country. That was the attraction there. It was a getting away from, especially in England, of the grimness and the tawdriness and the terrible grind that they'd had, you know, twice as long as we'd had it in the United States. And therefore he was welcomed as the new man, the new Englishman.
I don't like, I really don't like montage scenes. And it was scripted as a montage, which is going to come up, I think, in a minute, of the train going across, you know, Europe. And I kept putting it off and putting it off. And we hadn't got very much material. I'd shot a bit on a map, and we'd done a few train wheels, one thing or another, and I really couldn't think how to make it all work. And my assistant kept saying to me, come on, you've got to do this montage. Oh, yes, I said, I'll do it. And I kept leaving it and leaving it and leaving it. Until one day he said, you really must do this montage, because, you know, the film isn't complete till we've got that. We can't really have a whole showing. Oh, I said, all right, give it to me. And I grabbed hold of it. I said, I'll do the wretched montage. And I put it all up, and I slung it around, and I threw it together, really very sort of angrily, really, more than anything, creatively angrily, if you like. And I said, there it is, that's it, okay, fine. Mark it up and give it back to him, please. And it stayed exactly as it was. It was exactly what you see in the film. It worked so well that I was even surprised. You notice the train turns green, but nobody ever worried. That's because that's a library shot.
Production manager Bill Hill, who portrayed Captain Nash, always joked about his brief non-speaking part. He said, "It was totally preposterous if you thought about it. Here I am arriving in Zagreb Station on this terribly important mission to assist a fellow agent, and after we trade the recognition signal, we're on our way to the bathroom. What were we supposed to be saying anyway? Let's have a pee, and then we'll board the train? It was ridiculous."
I have to tell you, I was very friendly with Robert Shaw. We had done a lot of things before he was ever a star. He was always used to do screen tests for girls and things like that. They always used to say, get Robert Shaw, he could do with the work, you know. And he was always the guy who had to kiss the girl.
Starting with Dr. No, Hunt and director Terence Young used a film editing technique comparable to television commercial cutting, which produced a very lean visual structure. Eager to make his directing debut, Hunt began to tire of the editing chores on the Bond films after the release of Thunderball in 1965. He agreed to return as editor and second unit director on You Only Live Twice only if producers Broccoli and Saltzman would let him direct the next picture. And he did direct On Your Majesty's Secret Service.
What happened was that I went to the studio on the Sunday, and it was not Bob Simmons who was the stunt arranger. It was another guy, but he really did come up with a jolly good thing. And I went there on the Sunday, and I used to be a boxer, and we worked out the whole fight, and we spent the whole day on the set. There was nobody there, just a prop man and an assistant and somebody who kept bringing us sandwich and coffee. We stayed there from about 10 in the morning till about 6 at night. We got it all worked out. And in the morning, when they came on the set, it must have been a masterstroke, but one of the stuntmen didn't show up. He hadn't arrived. So I did the other thing. We did the whole of this fight with a double and me. And when it was all over, I said, I suppose you boys want your doubles, don't you? Yeah. And I think it was Sean said, well, if an old fart like you can do it, he said, I think we can. They did everything in this picture except one. There's only one thing in the whole fight that wasn't the two principals. And I think that's one of the reasons it looks good, because you don't have to cut away in the distance. You can stay close to them because you see the faces and things. So I put out the light as quickly as I could, because that would help this fight a great deal. So the gun goes off, that's right. Now they're in the dark, at least they should be, just the top light. They had knee pads, they had and elbow pads, and that's all. And we got away with this fight because of one thing, and it was a pure fluke. I added it at the end of the scene. I didn't have a topper at the end of the scene. And what's his name has made him cough up his money at one stage. He said to Sean, just before he kills him, he said, you won't be needing this, old man, and he takes it. And when Sean's killed the guy and he's lying there and he's just about to leave, he comes forward and he takes back the money. He said, you won't be using this, old man. The censor laughed. And on the strength of that, they only made one cut in the fight, just that one thing. Because in those days it was considered a very violent fight.
Sean Connery was born in Edinburgh, Scotland. What he brought to the character of Bond was a sense of the sexual magnetism that few actors possess. But Broccoli was especially impressed by Connery's stature and the fact that for a big man he moved like a cat.
Helicopter shooting is very dangerous and very difficult at times, because you can't manipulate, you can't really hold. Helicopters are so dependent on wind movements, and you cannot be specific about points where they're going to go and what they're going to do, because if the wind takes them suddenly on a gust, they move and they'll crash into something.
What had happened was we were on the dockside with the whole crew waiting to go out on location. It was raining. But in Scotland, it was one of these strange things. The island over there was in sunlight and we were in the rain. So I said to my art director, the assistant art director, come along with me, we'll see what we need over there. And I went with the pilot. And the pilot, as we were taking off, he said, you got to put on your Mae West. And I said, why? He said, because flying over water, it's a Ministry of Aviation law. I said, oh shit, I'm a good sailor, don't worry. And I just slung it over my arm, otherwise I'd be dead. He was showing off, and he took off backwards, and he got to about 100 feet and was making a very glamorous departure from the dockside. And he got about that far away from the shore, and somebody conked out on the engine. And we just went warm like that. We were underwater for about 30 seconds, still able to breathe because the canopy wasn't filling with water. And it slowly was filling up like this, and this guy couldn't swim. Nobody seemed to be able to swim in this bloody picture. The art director, I forgot to tell you, we had a camera mount on one side of the machine because it was our camera car, one of our camera helicopters. And just before we took off, he said, I better warn you, if there is a crash at sea, I have to turn the helicopter on its side. I said, why? He said, because if you're underwater and you come up and the chopper's still going, it'll take your head off. I said, okay, well, you turn it inside. And at that moment I looked, and I could see that we couldn't open the door on my side because the camera mounting was there. So I said, you turn it over on this side, and we all had a terrific giggle. We then took off, and sure enough, it's exactly what happened. He managed to swing the thing over, and we landed not quite like that, but on that kind of an angle against something. I don't know how, something must have broken. And there we were like this. The art director was a bright kid, assistant art director, and he got out. He never came under the water. As the thing hit the water, it stayed there for about 3 or 4 seconds. He got that door open and was out like a dose of salts. By now, we were in the water, and I was saying, and he kept saying, I can't swim. And I said, I get up. So I took an enormous breath, and I'll tell you something very interesting. I made an awful lot of money at dinner parties in the next few years after that by saying I can hold my breath for 2 minutes. I'll tell you right now, I could have held my breath another minute under that water there the moment I knew I was going to get out. Because I actually stopped on the way up with this chap, and that's why I practically killed him. I stopped about every 10 feet, so I didn't get bubbles in the blood, because if you go straight up like that, you risk getting the bends. And I must have stopped 3 or 4 times on the way up, and my lungs were bursting, but I knew perfectly well I was going to survive, I was going to live, and I swear, I tell you now, I could have probably lasted another minute, because you have to. He, of course, was gulping water all this time, and I didn't know what to do, whether it was better to, and I put my hand over it was pretty awful. And we got up, and one of the stuntmen, and he's always had a job with me ever since, he was the only guy who had the wits to start swimming the moment he saw, and nobody else thought of it. The others jumped in long after him. The stuntmen, about 4 or 5 of the stuntmen, swam out. And the moment we surfaced, they grabbed a hold of him, and they grabbed a hold of me because I was practically dead. And I had 40-something stitches in my leg, and nothing above my knee. And when the divers went in the next day from the insurance company, what happened was, how we got out was the perspex exploded with the pressure. It went whang like that. And we were sucked out of the thing, and I was totally untouched. I could have been blinded, smashed, gored to bits. The divers the next day, wearing heavy rubber gloves, all cut their hands on the perspex. And I had all these stitches in both legs that were like that. I was a real mess. So they pulled us to shore. I was taken to hospital. And an hour later, Harry Saltzman was panicking very much. And they were trying to get... David Lean was cutting Lawrence in the same building where they were, and they were asking David if he would take over and finish the sequence. And David said, yes, of course I will, if you want to. I know Terence very well. I'll help him out. I don't want screen credit like that, but I'll do 3 or 4 days. And Cubby said, hang on, Harry. He said, wait a minute. He called Bill Hill. And he said to Bill Hill, how's Terence? And Bill Hill said, I don't know, but he's gone to hospital. And Cubby said, did he walk? And Bill said, yes, he did. He said, well, break for lunch, give them their lunch, you'll be shooting after lunch. And at 2 o'clock, we were back on the boat. The poor wretched pilot damn near died. He was in a very bad way. And the burning water was mine. That was something that happened during the war. I was on maneuvers. I was in an armored division in a tank. And we were taken down one day to do a rehearsal of the landing in Normandy. And one of the objects that they'd given us, that they said the Germans were going to do, was to set fire to the sea. We'd had a report that they'd been putting oil things under the water. They did, but they ran out of oil.
The action in the book went directly from the Orient Express to Paris, where Klebb actually kicked Bond with one of her poisoned shoe knives, and it looked like the end for 007. Fleming was tired of the less than exciting book sales and was ready to kill off his agent once and for all. It was only through the intervention of American author Raymond Chandler that Fleming revived 007 in the next novel, Dr. No. From Russia with Love was also a big favorite of President John F. Kennedy, but it motivated United Artists to seriously consider the financing of a series of James Bond movies to be produced by Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. From Russia with Love opened in the U.S. with little fanfare on May 27, 1964. Like Dr. No, it did not have a major publicized premiere, and actually opened on a double feature with the B-film programmer War is Hell. It was only after the success of Goldfinger that Christmas that From Russia with Love was re-released on a double feature with Dr. No, and became a major hit. In fact, it was the most successful double feature in history.
All of this we had to coke up because we didn't have an end again. So really it's a reprise of the Dr. No ending when you analyze it, you know. And now we hear that wonderful music from Russia with Love. Enough, that's too much, baby. Oh, that wasn't Sean, that was somebody else's hand, that's right. Sean wasn't there for that.
This LaserDisc commentary is dedicated to screenwriter Richard Maybaum, who completed his interview shortly before his death.
And that's the last of the bits from the From Russia with Love band LaserDisc commentary. What was your favorite bit? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can see when I release the videos on the Goldfinger band LaserDisc commentary bits that were not included in part 1. They're coming up, stay tuned. Well, that's about all for now. Have a stellar day.